Hi, my name's Eric, and I'll be reading you selections from today's Cape Cod Times. Today's date is Tuesday, June 30th of 2026. We'll start with the weather, something that's on everybody's mind, I'm sure, especially as we have a heat wave approaching us. But today, a gusty thunderstorm in the afternoon possible, maybe one or two of those. It'll be breezy with a high of 78, and it starts to get humid. You can probably already feel that. Tonight, some clouds with thunderstorms across the Cape and Islands, high of 67, a low of 67 in the overnight. It'll be uncomfortable, so get those ACs going. On Wednesday, tomorrow, humid, afternoon thunderstorms possible with a high of 80 and a low of 70. But the real problems begin Thursday and Friday, where we have record-tying or maybe even record-setting heat coming our way, a high of 90 with very high humidity, a low of 72 in the overnight. You will definitely want to stay inside and out of the sun if possible. On Friday as well, a high of 93 expected, thunderstorms possible in the afternoon, but brutally humid and uncomfortable on Friday afternoon. A low of 70 in the overnight. Get a little bit of a break on Saturday, 87 the high and 69 the low, but stray thunderstorms, very warm, very humid. So enjoy today, even though it may rain, and maybe a little bit of tomorrow. Again, it may rain, but Thursday, Friday, and Saturday promise to be extremely uncomfortable. Please be careful. Stay inside if you can. Keep your air conditioning on or whatever you use to cool yourself. And listen to us. We'll try to entertain you. The sun will rise at 5:10 a.m. today. It'll set at 8:19 p.m. We'll have 15 hours and 9 minutes of daylight. The moon will rise at 9:16 p.m. and set at 5:19. Now, heading to the front of the paper, where the lottery results used to be kept, but because the Cape Cod Times goes to press too early to give you those, the late results, they have cut them from the paper. But somebody asked for them, and since you asked for them, I am happy to give them to you. So for the numbers game, we go to masslottery.com, and the winning numbers for Monday, June 29th of 2026, in the midday were 0, 3, 9, 6. Again, yesterday's midday winning numbers 0, 3, 9, 6. In the evening last night of the numbers game, the results were 3, 3, 8, 0. That's last night's evening winning numbers at 3, 3, 8, 0. Mass cash was drawn yesterday, June 29th, and in the midday, those numbers were 4, 9, 20, 22, and 33. Again, yesterday's midday winning mass cash numbers, 4, 9, 20, 22, and 33. And in the evening, we finish up Monday, June 29th, lottery results for mass cash with 3, 5, 13, 14, and 35. Again, last night's mass cash winning numbers 3, 5, 13, 14, and 35. Good luck to all who play. Remember us if you win. The headline above the fold, if there was such a thing in a digital newspaper, we were seeing incredibly high amounts. Cape Cod sees surge in giant lion's mane jellyfish sightings, and there's a photo of one, quite an ugly sight, I have to say. It's a rosy reddish color. It's a blob, an amorphous blob with lots of trailing stingers and whatever they call those things, tentacles, I guess. When underwater archaeologist Brandon Clifford recently arrived at the Whydah Galley excavation site off Wellfleet, it wasn't the 18th century pirate ship wreckage below that had his attention first. It was the swarm of lion's mane jellyfish pirouetting through the water above it. The jellyfish, which can grow to be several feet across and are considered the largest jellyfish species in the world, were present in such numbers that Clifford and his team briefly considered calling off the day's dive. We're out here at the Whydah site now, and we're anchored up over our dive area for the day, and there are jellyfish in the water like I've never seen before, Clifford said in a video that was posted from the site on June 14th. Similar reports have been emerging from across Cape Cod, the islands, and the South Shore, where fishermen, surfers, beachgoers, and marine researchers say lion's mane jellyfish appear to be showing up in unusually large numbers lately. It's normal to see a few lion's manes, especially as we get into the summer months, but we're already seeing more than we normally see all summer, said Owen Nichols, Director of Marine Fisheries Research and Interdisciplinary Research Coordinator at the Center for Coastal Studies in Provincetown. For beachgoers, the most immediate concern is the jellyfish's sting. Jellyfish researcher Nicole Corbett, President and Executive Director of the Popponesset Water Stewardship Alliance, said lion's mane stings can be painful, particularly from larger individuals, and detached tentacles can continue to sting after separating from the animal. The sting's not deadly, but it is painful, and it can cause burning pain and temporary welts, she said. Where have the lion's mane jellyfish been spotted? Based on many reports from the public, Nichols said the lion's mane jellyfish are appearing in relatively high abundance all around Cape Cod, including in coastal harbors and bays and waters east of the Cape. Among those taking notice is Captain Darren Saletta of Monomoy Sport Fishing. Saletta said he first encountered numbers of lion's mane while surfing in May, and since then, he and his charter crew and guests have continued to encounter them. We were seeing incredibly high amounts, almost every time you'd look over the side of the boat, he said. Some have been particularly large, especially south of Chatham and east of Nantucket. He described one that stood out, saying, "It was kind of umbrellaed out. The radius of the tentacles and the head was about 15 feet. The head was a good 2 feet," Saletta said. While their sightings of the larger lion's mane have somewhat declined, Saletta said, we're still seeing a huge presence of smaller ones, to the point where they're tangling in the fishing lines. After 4 decades on the water, he said he's seen plenty of natural cycles that are driven by tides, currents, and changing ocean conditions, but the plethora of lion's mane jellies is still notable. I just know that we don't typically see them regularly, and we absolutely don't typically see them in such large numbers, he said. Corbett has monitored lion's mane and other species and local embayments for the past 4 years. She said small lion's mane began appearing locally in April. Last year, she observed large numbers of juvenile lion's mane in Popponesset and Wacoit Bays, beginning in February and peaking in late March. This year, their appearance was delayed, and she is unsure whether the larger jellyfish now getting reported are animals produced this year, older jellyfish pushed toward shore by changing winds and currents, or some combination of the two. She's also heard about large numbers of lion's mane washing in elsewhere off Cape. I have had multiple reports of them washing in by the dozens in Scituate, Marshfield, and Hull as well, Corbett said. And on June 23rd, she added, there were reports of the jellies washing up at Nantasket Beach in Hull, and people were posting photographs of them being collected in Dunkin' Donuts cups. When was the last time there were so many jellyfish off Massachusetts? Lion's mane jellyfish are native to Massachusetts waters. Periodic blooms aren't unprecedented, Corbett said. In fact, while reviewing her records, Corbett found reports of similar concentrations along north and east-facing beaches 6 years ago. She said this year feels similar to 2020, when we had a similar high relative abundance of lion's mane, including some larger individuals, as we're seeing now. Why are there so many jellyfish this year? What drives these blooms remains an active area of study. Corbett said warming spring temperatures and increasing zooplankton available can trigger the production of young jellyfish, while winds and currents determine where they ultimately end up. Nichols offered a similar assessment. Dynamic regional oceanography is most likely the primary driver, but in the ocean it's rarely just one thing, he said. Corbett has worked with local neighborhood groups to place jellyfish first aid kits along the private frontage of Popponesset Beach. She'd like to provide more kits to other beaches and plans to do outreach. The kits are stocked with neutralizing sprays and heat packs. Research suggests that 115 degrees of heat helps to break the venom down faster. Nichols described lion's mane as easy to distinguish from some of the region's other common jellyfish. Moon jellies are clear. Sea nettles tend to be more purple in color, and they have tentacles visible around the edges of the bell, while lion's manes tend to be reddish tinted with a dense cluster of tentacles extending well below the inside of the bell, he said. The presence of large numbers of jellies can signal broader changes in ocean health and marine ecosystems, Nichols said. I don't think we have enough data to make that inference based on the current observations, he added. For Saletta, who has built ecotourism and wildlife tours into his business, the sudden abundance has been less a cause for concern than another reminder of the variety of life that inhabits Cape Cod waters. It's an opportunity, he said, to showcase an interesting marine species. We really try to enjoy that, he said, and give people access to the amazing wildlife on the backside of the Cape. The next headline in the Cape Cod Times, we try to keep it local, so we will move to the Cape and Islands section. Cape Cod fishermen land an 8-foot stingray in a wild catch, by Bailey Allen. And there's a photo of a very large stingray, like massively large. 2 local fishermen were surprised last weekend when they hooked an 8-foot-long stingray on a Cape Cod beach. On Sunday, June 21st, at around 10 p.m., fishermen Hans Brings Jr. and Camden Bonaiuto were brown shark fishing on a dock near Popponesset Beach in Mashpee when an unexpected creature pulled on their line. We hooked a massive stingray off of the dock and the deck, Brings said, and at first I thought it could have been a massive shark, but we went down to the beach with a rod and it started sticking to the ground, almost like a suction cup. Dr. Jeff Kneebone, senior scientist in the Anderson Cabot Center for Ocean Life at the New England Aquarium, identified the ray as a rough-tailed stingray. They're very common off Cape Cod this time of year, and they're often caught by land-based shark fishermen, Kneebone said in a statement. The rough-tailed stingray is the largest whip-tailed stingray in the Atlantic Ocean. It can measure 8 feet across, and this one probably did, and weigh more than 600 pounds. And its tail is often much longer than its width. Brings estimated the stingray he hooked weighed nearly 200 pounds. Rough-tailed stingrays, according to the National Aquarium, are named for the thorny plates or tubercles that run along the outside part of their body and the base of their tail. The stingrays, which inhabit both sides of the Atlantic, spend most of their time partially buried, ready to ambush small fish and invertebrates. They rarely come into contact with humans, but they are harvested commercially on a small scale and marketed as fish meal and oil, according to the National Aquarium. They're also targeted occasionally by anglers. The 23-year-old Mashpee fisherman said he and Bonaiuto got in the water to move the ray onto shore, which took them about an hour and 45 minutes because it began thrashing around. It was moving its wings so roughly that it was splashing water and shooting it straight at us, Brings said. It's pretty scary because the tail was uncontrollable and it was just whipping around. Rough-tailed stingrays protect themselves by lashing their tail, according to the National Aquarium. The spine and its barbs can pierce a victim's skin, allowing venom to enter the wound. Brings said he ended up using a towel to secure the stingray's tail and grabbing the leader of the fishing line to move the hooked creature farther up onto the beach. Using that towel to control the tail and grabbing the leader was definitely the difference between getting stabbed by the tail and not, Brings said. The two were finally able to remove the hook from the stingray and invited neighborhood kids over to see the animal before dragging it back into the water. Good for them. The fisherman said he has caught tiger sharks, tarpons, and some other really big sharks over the years, but he called his stingray prize a monstrous catch. I've never successfully landed a ray like this. Hooking and landing one, even if you fish your whole life on Cape, could be like a once-in-a-lifetime event, Brings said. According to the International Game Fish Association, the all-tackle world record stands at 405 pounds for a rough-tail stingray that was caught off Isla Morada in Florida in 1972. An editorial note, Pete Thomas of For the Win contributed to this report. And since our goal is to exhaust the local news, in high school athletics, moving to the sports page, local athletes decide to stay or go with prep schools as an option, by Adam Kirkjian. It's never an easy or simple decision, yet it's one that's being made more and more by area student athletes. That's the choice to stay at your current high school or transfer to a prep school or NEPSAC one. There's no tried and true method when it comes to that process. As Mashpee athletic director and football coach Matt Treveri said, every kid's story is unique. These stories are unfolding every day, and now more than ever, as prep schools grow their reach with each passing semester. One of the best athletes in the area is Nantucket football and basketball player Burke Lombardi, a quarterback in football and a guard/forward in basketball. Lombardi was an all-scholastic in both sports, as a freshman and as a sophomore. A player with his skill set and a quality academic profile is going to be a college prospect in either sport, maybe both. At the end of this past winter season and heading into the spring one, Lombardi made the announcement on X that he'll be transferring to St. George's, an ISL school in Rhode Island. Part of Lombardi's decision had to do with the ability to reclassify. A sophomore, instead of starting at St. George's as a junior, Lombardi will reclassify into the class of 2029. That aspect of it is attractive to certain student athletes, both from an educational to an athletic perspective. Everyone on Nantucket was really helpful, Lombardi said. They didn't do anything wrong to cause me to leave. Lombardi wants to play basketball or football at the next level, and said it would be tough doing that on the island. He also noted that traveling from Nantucket and other reasons helped make his decision to transfer to St. George's. Going to prep school, or specifically St. George's, has given me more exposure. The reclassing part would give me another year. Having more exposure academically and athletically was kind of the main reason. Also, some connections I already have in Newport. I have some family there not too far away. So those were the factors in my decision. The difficulty of making that call can mean something different to each student athlete. It can be a lot of pressure on a teenager. There are so many expectations to put on some kids. Lombardi's at peace with the choice he made. Not to bash anyone in Nantucket, the island, or the coaches at all, but just being at a prep school, making new relationships and new connections is a huge difference, Lombardi said. Whether that's football, basketball, or even just in life, those connections can get you pretty far, especially with recruiting. Barnstable football coach Ross Jetcola brings a unique perspective. Before he took over at Barnstable, Jetcola was assistant coach at Cheshire Academy, a NEPSAC, NEPSAC school that offers both reclassifying and postgraduate years. Jetkola said the former offers the biggest pull to potential student athletes. Off the top of my head, the reclassifying is the number one advantage over public schools, Jetkola said. That decision and the process is always different. In the preseason in 2025, Barnstable junior linebacker Anthony Perella was coming off a tremendous sophomore year. He was already on the radar of multiple Division I programs. Unfortunately, he suffered a season-ending injury in a scrimmage last fall. Perella considered going somewhere to reclassify. That would take some of the sting off his injury and give him more chances to impress college coaches. Jetkola asked his star player one question. "Why don't we just see what we can do here?" Jetkola asked, and Perella stayed. Jetkola kept colleges aware of Perella's recovery. Perella remained a star in the weight room and posted videos of himself lifting weights on social media. Even without a junior year on the field, Perella landed multiple Division I offers. And Perella heads into his senior year with great choices. That path doesn't have to be the exception to the rule, according to Jetkola. If your school, if your coaches, if your guidance counselors are all doing what they're supposed to do to expose the kids, we can make it as even as a playing field as possible, Jetkola said. The end goal? Treveri acknowledges the pull that prep schools have. For some kids, it's the right decision. For others, it's not. Treveri just cautions against it because it's not a cure-all to every potential player. I tell parents every time, well, what's the end goal? Treveri said. When he sees some people using it as a litmus test of where to go to college, Treveri said that's not always the best way to figure that out. There are other ways to do it. If you really want to know where you are, go to prep showcases, Treveri said. If you think you're a great baseball player, go play in Cobb County. Go play in the Cobb League down in Georgia. You'll figure out where you are. You think you're a great basketball player? Go try out for BABC. Go play for their best teams. Play in the American Division, Under Armour, and play in Three Stripe. Play in the EYBL. Those are the guys playing in Division I basketball, getting scholarships. This issue is not going away. Prep schools will keep offering what they offer, and kids will either stay or go on a multitude of factors. The best advice Treveri can give is to think about that end goal and then go from there. There's certainly some success stories, Treveri said. My concern is that people understand that there's many sides to this thing. Just going to a prep school doesn't guarantee anything. And since we've completed every local news story, other than the obituaries which come up at the half hour, we'll move on to some regional and national news. Some new student loan caps are paused by Medora Lee of USA Today. A Department of Education change to the definition of who's considered professional for student loan purposes is on pause. But borrowers shouldn't get too comfortable, education experts say. Other changes are still going into effect tomorrow or on July 1st. A federal judge said late on June 25th that the department's narrowing of the definition of a professional degree when determining eligibility for higher student loan limits was likely not allowed without a change from Congress. Under the department's new rule, only 11 degrees made the cut for federal student loan limits of $50,000 annually and $200,000 over a lifetime. Many people were unpleasantly surprised to see that fields such as nursing, accounting, architecture, and physical therapy were excluded from the professional category and were given loan limits of $20,500 annually and $100,000 over a lifetime. Schooling for occupations like physician associates, nursing, and accounting could cost more than that, experts said. The challenge for many grad students is that their degree cost is likely to exceed these caps, said Jennifer Finetti, Director of Student Advocacy at Scholarship Owl. The court pause makes eligibility for higher loan caps temporarily uncertain, said Stacy McFeetris, Senior Director of Education Finance at Bright Horizons. While the guidance is unclear, it appears institutions may continue to rely on the prior definition of professional degree, unless or until the court rules otherwise. Given the timing, students should proceed as planned for the upcoming academic year. This order allows the Department of Education to enforce the statutory professional degree definition and loan caps, a department spokesperson said in an email. The Department of Education is reviewing the order and will take appropriate action. But although the judge's ruling temporarily blocked the use of the new definition, families should continue as planned because broader sweeping student loan changes that are set for July 1st are still happening, experts said. They include the end of Graduate Plus loans, which allowed borrowing up to the full cost of attendance. There also are new federal borrowing caps. Graduate student loans will be capped at $20,500 annually, a lifetime limit of $100,000. Professional students have a $50,000 annual cap with a lifetime limit of $200,000. The combined graduate and professional degree lifetime limit is $257,500. Parent Plus loans are capped at $20,000 per student per year with a lifetime limit of $65,000 per dependent student. The final say on which degrees qualify as professional may take a while, experts said. Organizations that filed suit in May still welcomed the temporary halt. This is an important step for nurse practitioner students, as well as the future healthcare workforce and the patients who depend on them for access to care, Valerie Fuller, president of the American Association of Nurse Practitioners, one of the plaintiff organizations, said in a statement. Final story on the front page of today's Cape Cod Times. Mediators try to ease tensions in Iran. Closure of waterway sends oil prices higher. By Andrew Mills, Parisa Hafizi, and Humaira Pamuk of Reuters in Dubai. Iranian and U.S. technical teams working on the implementation of an interim peace deal are expected to meet in Doha in the coming days, a source told Reuters on June 29th, after tit-for-tat weekend strikes threatened to derail the fragile accord. Mediators have established communications channels to de-escalate any incidents, and technical talks are set to continue, the source with knowledge of the discussions added. A senior Iranian source said there would be a meeting in Doha, Qatar, on June 30th. But unlike previous technical talks between Tehran and Washington in Switzerland, the focus would be on managing the Strait of Hormuz and de-escalating tensions. President Donald Trump confirmed in a social media post that there would be a meeting in Doha that day, but gave no details. The United States and Iran signed a 14-point Memorandum of Understanding, an MOU, which was aimed at ending 4 months of conflict on June 17th, under which both sides agreed to cease hostilities and reopen the strait, through which a fifth of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas typically transits. Closure of the waterway sent oil prices to above $100 a barrel, pushing up global inflation and causing a political headache ahead of midterm elections for Trump, who touted falling oil and gas prices in a series of other early morning posts on June 29th. The accord paves the way for 60 days of more in-depth talks on thornier issues, such as Iran's nuclear program, although both sides have given conflicting accounts as to what was agreed to. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian said on June 29th that $6 billion out of $12 billion of assets that are frozen in Qatar would be released following the accord and returned to Iran, Iranian state media reported. He described the memorandum, which includes waivers for sanctions on Iran's oil and petrochemical sectors, as a great victory for the Iranian people. The senior Iranian source said Doha and Tehran were in the final stages of agreeing on technicalities for the release of the first $6 billion of frozen assets going back to Iran, which he said would be issued in 2 tranches. Oil prices rose June 29th, with Brent crude futures up almost 1% after the weekend tension highlighted the fragility of the U.S.-Iran accord. White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt told Fox News on June 29th that U.S. envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner would fly to Doha this week for high-level meetings, which would take place alongside technical talks. As far as we're concerned, we're holding up our end of the ceasefire. Violence will be met with violence, Leavitt added. But in an indication of the uncertainty around the interim deal, Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister Kazem Garibabadi said on June 29th before Trump's post that technical working group meetings were not scheduled for this week, according to Iran's Tasnim news agency. Consultations with Qatar, including following up on the implementation of the other side's commitments, were continuing as usual, he said. A return to talks would follow several days of strikes and counterstrikes since an Iranian projectile hit a cargo vessel in the Strait of Hormuz on June 25th, with both the United States and Iran accusing the other of breaking the interim ceasefire. Iran, which has sought to exert its authority over shipping in the strait, launched missiles and drones at U.S. military sites in Kuwait and Bahrain early on June 28th, shortly after Trump issued his latest threat against Iran. There may come a point when we are no longer able to be reasonable, and we will be forced to militarily complete the job that we very successfully started, Trump said on social media. If that happens, the Islamic Republic of Iran will no longer exist! He added. About an hour after Trump's post, Kuwait's army said its air defenses were responding to missile and drone attacks, while Bahrain said sirens had sounded there. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps said U.S. strikes had violated the ceasefire and that American bases in the region would experience hell in the coming days. Meanwhile, Lebanon's parliament speaker Nabi Berri, a key ally of Iran-backed Hezbollah, has cast doubts on a U.S.-brokered agreement between Lebanon and Israel aimed at halting a parallel war there. Berri warned on June 29th that the deal could lead to attempts to divide Lebanese and said it would not be implemented. Israeli artillery shelled an area near the border in southern Lebanon June 29th, according to the Lebanese state news agency, and the sound of a drone buzzed over Beirut, Reuters reporters said. Israel has occupied a swath of southern Lebanon in a war with Hezbollah that began on March 2nd, when the group opened fire at Israel after Iran came under U.S. and Israeli attack. The latest round of conflict in Lebanon began after Hezbollah struck Israel early in the war, in what it said was support of its backer, Iran. Israel's response has led to mass displacement and more than 4,000 deaths in Lebanon. Tehran has said ending that conflict and withdrawing Israeli troops from the south of Lebanon are an integral part of any deal struck with the U.S. to end the wider war that began with the U.S.-Israeli strikes on Iran on February 28th. And we're a few minutes past the midway point in our reading of the Cape Cod Times. Regular listeners, I'm sure, are aware it's at this stage that we move to a different kind of local news, which are the obituaries and death notices noted in that day's publication. And in the Cape Cod Times of June 30th, 2026, there are 2 obituaries. The first is of Francis E. Rice of Wareham. Francis Edmund Rice III, 72 years old, of the Parkwood Beach neighborhood of Wareham, passed on June 26th of 2026. He was beloved husband of Gail L. Rice, née Grassy, with whom he shared 45 years of marriage. He was born on Elmendorf Air Force Base in Anchorage, Alaska. He was raised in Franklin and moved to Wareham in 1984, where he made his home for more than 4 decades. Francis worked as a driver for United Parcel Service in Sagamore. Earlier in his career, he was employed at Wang Laboratories in Lowell. He found great joy in spending time on the water, golfing, and riding motorcycles. During his years in Franklin, he was an active member of the Rotary Club. Survivors include his wife, Gail Rice of Wareham, and many family and friends. Those family and friends are invited to visit on Thursday, July 9th, at Chapman Funerals and Cremations in Wareham at 2599 Cranberry Highway. That's Route 28 in Wareham from 4 to 6 p.m. A prayer service will follow at 6 p.m. Any donations in his memory may be made to the Champs Animal Shelter. The other obituary in today's Cape Cod Times is of Judith Ballantyne of Harwich. Judith Edelman Ballantyne of Harwich Port passed on June 26th. Loving wife of Larry Jean Ballantyne for just under 55 years. She is survived by many family and friends. Judy was kind and generous, smart and curious, imaginative and expressive. The world's a better place for having had her in it. She'll be missed terribly by her family and friends. A visitation will be held on Thursday, July 2nd, from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. at Chapman Funerals and Cremations at 678 Main Street in Harwich. In lieu of flowers, please consider making a donation to the Harwich Food Pantry or Outer Cape Health Services. And that concludes the obituaries noted in today's Cape Cod Times of June 30th, 2026. Now's a good time to remind you that if you miss any of the information that we share in our readings, including those service dates or any of the phone numbers or email addresses that are so prevalent in many of the articles we read, you can always go to audiblelocalledger.org. It's a fully disability-compliant website. Click on the Listen tab, and All Reads to the Blind has 150 chronologically arranged readings that we do here. So the most recent are at the top, and you can catch up on anything you might have missed. We also keep a wide variety of periodicals and literature up there for your listening pleasure. Our radio plays are under the Ledger Actors Workshop. We have about 25 of those done by volunteers. Many are exceptional. I think you'll enjoy those. And our supermarket shopping guides are up there, so you can know what's on sale at the supermarket and grocery stores. All of that is free for people who are blind or print disabled at audiblelocalledger.org. Moving back into the news columns, the headline reads, Trump says reflecting pool is in full use, by James Powell and Drew Pittock of USA Today. President Donald Trump said that the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool on the National Mall is in full use after an algae bloom in the pool and portions of the blue paint that was applied during renovations he commissioned began peeling off. Trump's June 28th social media post came after a tour of Washington, D.C. landmarks, during which he declared many of the monuments were completely renovated and restored, and announced plans for a renovation of a golf course facility in the district. He blamed, without evidence, criminal, radical left vandals for creating great damage to the reflecting pool, which he said was 100% free of leaks and any of the other problems it's had since its building in 1922 last week. The paint appeared to have begun peeling off on June 18th, 10 days before Trump's post on Truth Social. The pool's been suffering from an algae bloom since at least June 16th, as seen in photos that were compiled by USA Today. Algae blooms have long bedeviled the landmark, though the one that broke out in the wake of the renovations appears to have reduced. The president said in a June 26th speech that renovations would restart following the Independence Day holiday. Former President Joe Biden called his Oval Office successor a loser during a gala in Maryland over the weekend, accusing him of hiring his own pool guy to fix the reflecting pool. Whoa, what a loser, Biden, the 46th president, said. The reflecting pool reflects something even worse, the narcissism and incompetence at the core of this administration, Biden said on June 27th. Interior Secretary Doug Burgum said in a June 27th interview on Fox News that 7 arrests and 18 police reports have been filed in connection with the pool. Burgum did not name those arrested or specify any charges, but said that there would be full prosecution. USA Today reached out to the Department of the Interior to confirm the number of arrests and citations. National Park Service Deputy Director of Operations Frank Lands said in a sworn declaration that a portion of the paint was damaged and a portion of caulk laid over foam sealant was cut with a sharp knife or razor. According to Lands, the National Park Service reported the damage to U.S. Park Police. Officers responded on June 9th. The statement does not say when the damage occurred, if it was an act of vandalism, or identify any potential suspects. The declaration was made in connection with a lawsuit arguing that the Trump administration illegally renovated the pool. The Park Service didn't respond to previous requests for comment from USA Today on Land's declaration. Trump also announced in the Post that renovations to East Potomac golf links would begin on September 1st. The renovation comes after a nonprofit organization and 2 residents in Washington sued the Trump administration to try to block the project. Editorial note contributing to that story were Michael Loria and Swapna Venugopal Ramaswamy of USA Today and Reuters. The next headline in the Cape Cod Times of Monday, June 30th, Deadly Floods Strike Kentucky and Tennessee by Christopher Cann of USA Today. At least 5 people were killed and dozens are missing following severe storms in Kentucky and Tennessee that triggered flash floods and washed out roads, officials said. 2 rounds of storms dropped nearly a foot of rain in some areas of Kentucky, surpassing previous rainfall records and overwhelming local communities. At least 4 people were killed in the storms, Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear said on June 28th. This flooding has devastated so many communities across our state and taken the lives of 4 children of God, gone too soon, Beshear said, adding that more than 63 water rescues have been conducted by local and state public safety agencies. While we're still in the search and rescue phase, we're also working quickly to survey damage, to submit a request for federal assistance, he added. People have lost their homes and so much more, and this type of support will be essential as we work to recover and rebuild together. 3 people died in Madison County, including a man and woman who were found in a flooded basement, according to the coroner's office. Another man died in a weather-related car accident, the coroner's office said. Their identities have not been released. In Hardin County, a juvenile died after a car overturned in a flooded creek, Wave 3 News reported. The driver and another juvenile were treated and released from a local hospital. Police said the driver was arrested on DUI and first-degree assault charges, local news outlets reported. In Granger County, Tennessee, a mother died on June 28th after rescuing her son from being swept away by floodwaters, WVLT reported. The woman, Mary Evelyn Nicole Manning Kellion, who was 39 years old, managed to pull the boy out of harm's way, but could not escape the raging flash flood herself. By the evening of June 28th, most of the rain had dissipated, though search and rescue operations were ongoing in some parts of Kentucky. There are a lot of rescues going on right now, Beshear said in a video address June 28th. Beshear declared a statewide emergency, and at least 18 cities and counties in Kentucky issued emergency declarations over the weekend. In Madison County, where the worst of the flooding occurred, at least 320 homes were without water, and 17 households sought temporary shelter, according to the governor's office. Beshear said the state will conduct damage assessments statewide and will request public and individual assistance from the federal government. He urged people to avoid driving if possible, to avoid more rescues, and keep the roads clear for emergency responders. If you can stay off the roads, do so. Bridges have been wiped out, entire roads have been wiped away, and there's still both standing and moving water, he said. Editorial note contributing to that reportage was Caroline Neal and Stephanie Kuzidum of the Louisville Courier-Journal. The next headline, Justices leave $5 million Carroll Award intact. Supreme Court will hear transgender youth and voting cases next term, by Maureen Gropp of USA Today in Washington. The Supreme Court won't stop President Donald Trump from having to pay $5 million to writer E. Jean Carroll for sexually abusing and defaming her, declining on June 29th to review a 2023 jury verdict. The justices did agree to hear high profile on voting rules and transgender youth in their next term, which starts in October. It was the first time since his return to office that Trump asked the court to weigh in on a personal legal issue. During the 2024 presidential campaign, the court, which has a 6-3 conservative majority, ruled that former presidents have broad immunity from criminal prosecution for official acts. Although Carroll's suit involved events long before Trump's presidency and is a civil, not criminal case, his lawyers wrote that a president shouldn't be burdened with defending himself against decades-old charges. It's deeply damaging to the fabric of our republic for President Trump in the midst of a historic presidency to have to take his focus away from his singular and unique duties as chief executive, they wrote in a filing. This mistreatment of a president cannot be allowed to stand. Carroll said in 2019 that Trump sexually assaulted her at a New York City department store in 1996. Trump fired back with allegations she was making up the story to sell her book. Carroll sued him, eventually winning an $83.3 million judgment. As the case was ongoing, Trump repeated the denial in a 2022 social media post. Carroll then sued Trump again, and in 2023, a New York jury found Trump liable for sexual abuse against Carroll. This resulted in the $5 million verdict and the appeal the High Court rejected June 29th. Trump's lawyer said the jury should not have been allowed to hear from two other women who alleged Trump assaulted them, or to review the 2005 Access Hollywood recording of Trump bragging about grabbing women by their genitals. The Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals rejected Trump's argument that the trial judge erred in permitting that evidence. And even if the judge got it wrong, the appeals court ruled in 2024, taking the record as a whole and considering the strength of Ms. Carroll's case, we are not persuaded that any claimed error or combination of errors in the district court's evidentiary rulings affected Mr. Trump's substantial rights. Trump has filed 3 appeals of the $83.3 million judgment, and the Second Circuit Court of Appeals rejected each one. Trump's lawyers have said they're preparing a Supreme Court appeal in that case. The High Court also declined to revisit a landmark decision about press freedom that limits when a public figure can sue for libel or defamation. In New York Times versus Sullivan, the court ruled that the newspaper couldn't be sued for damages unless the journalists knew they were printing false information about a public official or were reckless about not checking it. Alan Dershowitz, a professor emeritus at Harvard Law School, alleged he was defamed by CNN. He argued that Standard has devolved into near absolute immunity from media defendants. The 11th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals backed a federal judge's ruling for CNN, saying the available evidence points to the reporter's sincere, if mistaken or even overwrought, belief in the truth of their accusations. Dershowitz, who no one disputes is a public figure, has presented no evidence that CNN's commentators or producers acted with actual malice, Judge Britt Grant wrote for the court. 2 of the court's 6 conservative justices, Clarence Thomas and Neil Gorsuch, would have taken the case. The High Court did agree to review state voter registration laws in Arizona that lower courts said conflict with federal rules and suppress the vote. The dispute about provisions Arizona enacted in 2022 that aim to further prevent non-citizens from voting is part of a larger effort by Republicans who have raised doubts about the integrity of elections. Data shows that non-citizens voting in federal elections is extremely rare. The Biden administration and voting rights groups challenged Arizona's law, arguing it conflicts with a federal statute requiring states to use a standard registration form for federal elections. That form requires voters swear, under penalty of perjury, that they're a citizen. Arizona's voter registration form, by contrast, requires documentary proof of citizenship. Lower courts have ruled against Arizona's method of purging voter rolls within 90 days of an election. They've also said the state can't require documentary proof of citizenship to vote in federal elections for residents using the state registration form. The court on June 29th agreed to hear appeals from Republicans who are contesting those rulings. The justices declined, however, to decide whether voters can be prevented from casting a ballot by mail unless they provide proof of citizenship. That leaves in place a ruling blocking that provision. The Supreme Court will also decide whether a group of parents can challenge Washington state laws protecting transgender runaway children. The case is the latest involving transgender issues that the court has agreed to hear in recent years, and it's the first centered on parents' rights to be involved in a child's gender identity transition. The parents, along with two national organizations, say the laws allow minors to seek medical care without their parents' consent or knowledge. State officials describe the laws as modest steps to address the crisis of transgender youth homelessness. Lower courts dismissed the challenge, ruling the parents hadn't shown they've been harmed by the laws or that they're likely to be. An editorial note contributing to that was Bart Jansen of USA Today. The next headline in the Cape Cod Times of June 30th, Brown, PBS talk show host, dies at 93, a journalist known for his trailblazing interviews. This is written by Terry Collins of USA Today. Iconic journalist Tony Brown, the trailblazing host and producer of Tony Brown's Journal, a long-running PBS show known for its frank discussions on politics, race, and culture for nearly 4 decades, has died. He was 93. Brown passed away from coronary heart disease at his Newport News, Virginia home on June 17th, his family announced on June 26th via his Facebook page. Brown's presence on television, beginning in the late 1960s, came at a time when there was little news-related programming for predominantly black audiences nationwide during the post-civil rights era. By the time his show officially ended in 2008, with runs on both public and syndicated television, Brown's family estimated he had interviewed more than 1,000 guests, ranging from civil rights activists, including Angela Davis and the Reverend Jesse Jackson, numerous politicians such as President Ronald Reagan, to popular stars Stevie Wonder and Denzel Washington. Few questions were deemed off limits as guests knew they were in store for Brown's revered, blunt delivery. Emmy-winning TV producer and director Jesse Vaughn told USA Today. Long before diversity became a corporate buzzword, Tony Brown was documenting Black America with intelligence, honesty, and depth, Vaughn said. Through Tony Brown's Journal, he created one of the few national platforms where the stories, struggles, achievements, and ideas of people of color were examined with the seriousness they deserved. He was never fully appreciated during his lifetime, Vaughn continued about Brown, but history has a way of correcting what the present often overlooks. After working for a newspaper in Detroit, Brown joined the city's public television station in 1968, where he was a producer for its black-related news program. In 1970, Brown had moved to New York City to become the executive producer and host of an award-winning monthly public TV show called Black Journal, which debuted 2 years earlier and aired nationally. The Emmy-winning program featured commentary, documentaries, and public opinion segments that drew both praise and criticism. In 1973, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting announced it would withdraw funding for the program, Brown's family said. And that decision prompted nationwide protests as Black Journal continued airing, but on a limited basis. By 1977, the show went from airing monthly to weekly. It would eventually bear Brown's name as it secured a sponsorship deal with the Pepsi-Cola company and briefly entered national syndication before returning to public television. By September of 1995, PBS said the show was averaging 5 million viewers, the New York Times reported. It was must-see TV, Vaughn said, adding that Brown's goal was to promote positive images of black people rather than to feed into perceived stereotypes. People trusted Tony. When we called to say, Tony would like to do an interview with you, we usually got, when, as a response. Aisha Karama, a veteran TV executive who served as a longtime producer on a show Brown also hosted on WRC-TV in Washington, D.C., told USA Today on June 27th. Tony got right to the heart of the matter, in search of an informed response, Karama said. He knew how to ask a question so everybody learned something in the end. Brown also hosted a syndicated national radio show and wrote a syndicated newspaper column, as well as several books. Brown served as a historian of the black experience and simultaneously challenged the nation to expand their minds, added Vaughn, a cultural critic who directed a similar interview show for Jesse Jackson, produced by music entertainment mogul Quincy Jones in the 1990s. Brown was unique in that sense because he made a conscious effort. He documented the most significant issues that were facing us, Vaughn said. Couldn't have always been about ratings. He wanted to make sure proper knowledge was made available and that his message came across. He never insulted his audience. Brown also helped shape future journalists. In 1971, he founded the School of Communications at Howard University in Washington, D.C., and served as its dean until 1974. In 1980, Brown founded Black College Day, attracting 18,000 students to help bring attention to historically black colleges, the HBCs, and universities, and encourage students to consider those institutions. Congress officially designated the last Monday in September to honor that observance. That same year, President Jimmy Carter signed an executive order to strengthen HBCUs and increase funding. In 1981, Reagan signed an executive order creating the White House Initiative on Historically Black Colleges and Universities and encouraged more federal funding for HBCUs. In 2004, Brown became the first dean of the Scripps Howard School of Journalism and Communications at Hampton University in Virginia, which he held until 2009. Brown was inducted into the Scripps Howard School of Journalism and Communications Hall of Fame 3 years later. He ended up teaching at 4 colleges in his time. Brown was inducted into the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences Silver Circle in 2002 and into the National Association of Black Journalists Hall of Fame in 2015. A list of Brown survivors was not immediately available. No memorial or public service has been planned at this time, Brown's family said. And with that, we've come to the end of our reading of the Cape Cod Times for today, Tuesday, June 30th of 2026. This is your reader, Eric, saying be well, be safe, look after each other, and remember our veterans, especially those we've lost recently. Bye for now.